Go ahead and try this question. If the ratio of x to y is 5 to 2, and the ratio of y to z is 1 to 15, what is the ratio of x cubed to z cubed? Typically, you'll see a question like this at the end of your math sections in the hards, and it's not too bad once you realize that you can actually transform ratios when they're written like this into proportions. And then once you have your proportions, you can rearrange them to get this ratio or this proportion between x cubed and z cubed. So let's start by writing out our proportions. So x to y is 5 to 2. So we can write this x is to y as 5 is to 2. So you just take your ratio and you transform it into a proportion by seeing that the ratio of x to y, or the proportion x to y, is the same as 5 to 2. Now we're going to do this for the other proportion, the other ratio. So we have y is to z as 1 is to 15. Note that now that we have two proportions, we've got one that relates x and y and one that relates y and z. Our ultimate goal is to relate x to z. So what we can do is solve one of these proportions for y and then substitute it into the other. So that we'll get an expression relating x and z, and then we'll move on to finding this ratio. So doesn't really matter. We'll solve this one for y, but you also could solve this one for y and substitute it into the other. It's the same either way. So I'll cross multiply. I'll get 5y is equal to 2x. So y is equal to 2/5 x. So let's take that. Let's plug that in here. So we're going to get 2/5 x over z is equal to 1 over 15. And notice I got what I was looking for, which is a relationship between x and z. So what I can do, let's go ahead and just cross multiply. I'll get z is equal to 2/5 times 15. Well, 2/5 times 15, the 5 is going to cancel the 15 to make it 3, and then 3 times 2 is 6. This becomes 6x. So what do I do to get this? Well, remember, because we can write this as a proportion, what we're looking for is to get x cubed over z cubed, and we want to know what this equals, right? That's our proportion. So let's take this, let's try to get it to look like x cubed over z cubed. So what I'll do is I'll divide both sides by z, and I'll get 6x over z equals 1. And now I'll divide both sides by 6, or times both sides by 1 over 6. And I'm going to get x over z is equal to 1 over 6. And finally, I need this to be x cubed over z cubed, so what I'll do is I'll just cube both sides. And when I do that, I get x cubed over z cubed is equal to 1 over 6 cubed, which is 216. So your answer would be 1 over 216. So just remember on questions like this that you can transform your proportions or your ratios into proportions and then solve it algebraically. You also, if you wanted to, for a question like this, the second method is to plug in numbers. So pick a number with ratio, pick two numbers, x and y, with ratios of 5 to 2. So let's say x equals 100, y equals 40. These numbers are in the ratio of 5 to 2. So y to z would be 1 to 15. So if y is 40, z is going to be, if it's in the ratio of 1 to 15, z is going to be 15 times as big as y is. So this would be 600, because 40 times 15 is 600. So now what is x to z? Well, that's just going to be 100 over 600, which is 1/6. And then we proceed as we did before, cube both sides, and we would get the same answer. So you also could plug in on these, but I think the algebraic way is totally fine, and maybe even easier, because picking the numbers here sometimes can be a little bit tricky to get them. I mean, they'll always work no matter what numbers you'll pick. You just got to be careful about, sometimes you get weird fractions and weird decimals. So I think for a question like this, the algebraic method is much better. To learn more about Reason Prep's SAT, SAT subject test, and ACT video courses, go to reasonprep.com/enroll, and you can find the link in the description below the video.